you can register for part 2 of this series by clicking on the link in the description. This will take you to a sign up page where you can register for part 2. All you need to provide is your first name, last name, email, and company details. Once you provide the details, all you need to do is hit on register, and you'll be able to watch the rest of the videos within this particular series. So we cover Windows Red Team defense evasion techniques, Windows Red Team privilege escalation techniques, for both Windows and Linux, and then persistence techniques for Linux and Linux defense evasion, as well as Windows Red Team lateral movement techniques. So once you hit register, you will be redirected to the course page or the series page where you'll be able to access the videos immediately on demand. So there we are. We can see that it's actually opened up, and we can go ahead and play the video like so, and you can access all of the videos right over here within the table of contents. So if I wanted to watch Linux Red Team persistence techniques, I can do that. You can also again create a new Linode account and get $100 in credit using this offer here, and you can download the course or series slides by clicking on this link here. So that's going to be it. Let's get started with today's video.
Hey guys, HackerSploit here, back again with another video. Welcome back to the Red Team training series. In this video, we're going to be talking about credential access techniques, and more specifically, we're going to be dealing with Windows targets, as this course was primarily targeted or designed for Windows targets. So you should have initial access on your target system and should have established a form of persistence, as well as obtained an elevated client or agent with Empire. With that said, let us take a look at what we will be covering in this video. Firstly, we'll get an idea of what credential access is. We'll then take a look at how to dump credentials with Mimikatz. We'll also take a look at how to dump credentials with the Windows Credentials Editor, as well as cracking NTLM hashes, right? So what is credential access? Well, credential access consists of techniques for stealing credentials like account names and passwords. And these techniques are used to get credentials, including keylogging or credential dumping. Using legitimate credentials, adversaries can essentially get access to systems, make them harder to detect, and provide the opportunity to create more accounts to help achieve their goals. So the objective here is once you've established a foothold and set up persistence, you're now supposed to try and get or dump passwords from memory, from the SAM database, or you can also, as it says within this description, set up keylogging to get user credentials that they may be utilizing when they log into certain accounts, etc., right? So the objective or the underlying goal here is to then use these credentials to then navigate through the network or across the network legitimately, instead of doing it through the use of tools or exploits. Right, so now let's take a look at the MITRE ATT&CK credential access tactic and the various techniques that exist within that particular tactic, and more specifically the key techniques that we will be essentially taking a look at. So we will be taking a look at dumping the contents of the SAM database. We'll also take a look at how to dump credentials and hashes from memory. We'll also explore dumping LSA secrets and cracking hashes with John the Ripper or Hashcat. All right, so we're going to be exploring quite a few techniques, and as I said, the credentials that we gather will then be used for for our later attacks, or when we want to perform lateral movement in some way. That being said, that's pretty much all that I wanted to cover in the theoretical aspect of this video. Now that we know what we're going to be doing, let's get started with the practical aspect. Alright, so given the fact that we're going to be utilizing Mimikatz, it's good to have an idea of what Mimikatz is and what it's used for. So Mimikatz is a security tool that was made to essentially extract plain text passwords, hashes, pin codes, and Kerberos tickets from memory. Mimikatz can also pass the hash, pass the ticket, and also build golden tickets, play with certificates or private keys, vault, etc. So again, it's a all-in-one utility that can be used on Windows to again dump passwords, clear text passwords, hashes, so on and so forth, right? And by default, because we are currently utilizing Empire as our C2 server, by default Empire does come with various
It comes with various Mimikatz modules that can be utilized. Now you can see that these are the agents that I got back from my Windows 10 virtual machine that I actually set up persistence for, and these are the agents that actually called back. And you can see I have two high integrity agents here, and we're just going to use one of them. And what we can do is we can actually search for a Mimikatz module. So we can search for sorry, let me just type that in again. So Mimikatz. And we can now utilize any of these modules to dump credentials that are relevant to what we're looking for. Now, again, we are not working in an Active Directory environment, and I will be making videos focused on that and focused on Kerberos tickets. But for now, let's talk about some of the modules that already exist here. For example, the SAM module, which essentially dumps the contents of the SAM database. So we can submit that, and again, it's going to execute, and we can click on tasks here, and we can then wait for the output from this particular Mimikatz module, right? Now, all of this is being done from PowerShell, which is great, and we should get the output here. Now, one thing that I want to make clear here is that Mimikatz, as insofar as I am concerned, has had some issues when working with Windows 10 systems, especially when you talk about dumping passwords from memory or logon passwords. Now, again, logon passwords and clear text passwords on Windows are not common to find, in that Windows systems are not configured to actually have clear text passwords stored in memory. But there you go. You can see that Mimikatz will firstly use the elevate functionality here to obtain, of course, the token, or impersonate the NT authority system token, as it does there. It then dumps the contents of the SAM database and provides us with the NTLM hashes for all the users on the system. So firstly, we have the domain there, and then of course we get the let's see if we can find the user credentials or the user hashes here. We get the I think we should be able to find them here. There we are, the NTLM hash for the IE user, which is the Internet Explorer user there. That's the VM, the default VM user for this particular VM. We also get the credentials for the SSHD or the SSH daemon, which again can be quite useful when it comes down to cracking. We also get, let's see if we can find it here. We also created the Empire user, which I believe there we are. There's the Empire user, and we get the NTLM hash for the Empire user. Now, again, these are all NTLM hashes, which again can be gathered for actually cracking. And of course, that'll take quite a while. What if we wanted to, again, try and test, as to whether we have any logon passwords within memory? So we can head over into our agents, and again, let me just click on one of them here, the one we were using before, because I want to use the same one, but in any case, we can run it on any. What if we wanted to dump the logon password? So again, I can search for Mimikatz, and we can then look for logon passwords. There we are, logon passwords, and we hit submit. And let's take a look at the actual task being executed here. So I'm just going to open that up here. And the output, again, based on our current configuration, will either be, it'll either dump the logon passwords if, logon passwords have actually been configured on our Windows target. So let's actually see this here. And that shouldn't take too much time to execute. If it does, again, we can, of course, interact with that particular agent, which we were currently using, and that is AH. There we are. And of course, you can rename agents to whatever fits your particular purpose. There we are. We can see we get an error here, and that is the sec URLSA acquire LSA key import. Right, so that's one of the issues that I've had before on Windows 10 systems, regardless of whether logon passwords have actually been configured. So you can see that doesn't dump anything. If we head back over to Starkiller, and let's again just interact with our agent here, and let's search for another module that we can try as well. As I said, we're going to be we are actually going to avoid utilizing any of the let's see, the ticket modules that have to deal with Kerberos tickets, and of course Active Directory in a larger sense. But we can dump the LSA. We can we can perform LSA dumping here. So we can specify the username to extract the hash for. So for example, we can say Empire. Let's see if it actually does that. If not, I am going to utilize another target system just to take you through these techniques. There we are. We can see that that particular task has been initiated. And let's see if we can get any legitimate output or any particular output from this. So again, we'll give that a few seconds. All right, so after running that particular module, I actually lost that particular agent, probably because of a timeout or an issue with the module. The main issue here seems to be that Mimikatz isn't getting a response whenever it executes a command, and that could be for one of a few reasons. So that means we'll actually have to revert to a much more manual approach. Now, again, we can do that using Empire, but I wanted to again perform some manual techniques using the Meterpreter document or malicious macro document we have created, and we are going to again spawn a session with Metasploit and again obtain an initial foothold on the target system, and let's see if we can again retrieve credentials through a much more manual approach. Now, of course, the agent might ping back, but that's something that we can't rely on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a new tab here, and I'll start up MSF console, and I'll actually configure it to match the payload. I'll use the multi-handler and I'll configure it to match the payload that I had actually configured. So multi-handler, set payload, I remember it was Windows, Meterpreter, reverse, HTTPS, right? And I'm going to set the L port to 8080, that's what I'd set, and then set the L host to my Kali VM. And of course, you can also replicate this with Cobalt Strike or Armitage if you are using it, and I'll set this to 192.168.2.21. That's the IP of my Kali VM, and I'll just hit run, and I'm going to execute that particular I'm going to execute the payload, and there we are. We can see we get a Meterpreter session. And again, if we list out the system information, we can see it is a 64-bit system. So our first objective here is to, again, migrate this process from a 32-bit process to a 64-bit process. So I'll display a list of all services running, and I will try and migrate to a stable service here just for the time being. It looks like we can migrate to the Explorer process. So I'm just going to migrate to PID 3640. So migrate 3640, and looks like process already running on that. So I'm going to migrate to another process. We can try, let's look for one that might work. We can try and migrate to SVC host. That might provide us with a stable base. Migrate 4036. And let's see if that actually works. If we obtain a 64-bit Meterpreter session, we can then start, we'll actually need to elevate our privileges first and foremost. And then once we've elevated our privileges, we can then utilize Mimikatz, primarily because most of the techniques we are going to try and utilize require an elevated session. So again, I'm just going to let this load here, and let's see, there we are. That looks like it failed. So let me find another service that we can actually migrate to here. I'm going to try and migrate to, we need a 64-bit process, obviously, one that is stable. We can try and migrate to 3268. 3268, probably we'll actually need one that's running under our current user, but let's try this, and if this doesn't work, we can again try one that's running under our current user. So I'm just going to find a process to migrate to. All right, so I have migrated successfully. So now again, if I type in sysinfo, you can see that we are on 64-bit Meterpreter session. So I'm going to put this in the background. And again, before we do that, let me just check something here really quickly. Let me get my current privileges. You can see we are, if we type in get privs, you can see that we're currently working under an unprivileged session. So our first order of business is to actually elevate our privileges, and we can do that by bypassing user access control. So I'm just going to search for bypass UAC, and we will utilize injection win SXS, and that usually works quite well on Windows 10 systems. So in terms of the options, we are running now on a 64-bit Meterpreter session. So we need to actually set the payload first and foremost. So payload Windows, x64 interpreter reverse TCP, right? And again, we'll utilize the default lhost and NL port options. This particular port is not being used. We also need to change the target from Windows x86 to Windows x64. All right, show options, set the session to option 2, and we hit run. Let's see whether we're able to elevate our privileges. Hopefully we are able to do that, and there we are. We get a interpreter session. Again, we can type in get UID. We're currently the IE user, but if we say get privs, and you can see we have additional privileges here. We also have the impersonate privilege, so we can load incognito, and we can then list tokens, the user tokens, and then elevate or impersonate the NT authority system token, which is what I'm going to do. So we're going to say impersonate token, and I'll paste that in there, hit enter. And now if I say get UID, you can see NT authority system. So we've successfully been able to elevate our privileges. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to prepare the Mimikatz binaries, which should already be prepackaged with Kali and a few others. So we're going to try and see whether we can do anything here, or anything else rather. Right, so what I'm going to do is we are going to upload, let me just see what directory I'm currently in. We are going to upload our binaries to the temp directory. Right, so we have nothing in the temp directory, so we can use the interpreter upload functionality to do that for us. Alternatively, if you have a command shell, you can utilize the cert utility to actually transfer the files over. I have a video that actually covers that, but we can say upload, and this is under user share Windows, I believe. No, actually that's not in my home directory. That's under user share Windows resources, and we should be able to get Mimikatz there. So let's try Mimikatz x64, and Mimikatz, Mimikatz.exe. All right, so that's going to upload it for us. I'm then going to get a shell session here, and I'll head over into my temp directory in the C drive, and we can then execute Mimikatz here. So Mimikatz. And now the first thing we need to do is actually check whether we have the correct privileges, or whether we have NT authority system privileges, which we of course do, but it's always good to check that. So privilege, we'll then say debug, and if it says privilege 20 okay, that means we're good to go. So again, we can try and dump the content, or the we can try and dump the logon passwords. So again, that can be done sec urlsa. And then we say log on passwords, hit enter, and we get the same error, which is fine. Let's try and dump the contents of the SAM database. That's interesting. It doesn't actually provide us with anything there. We actually, so I think we'll have to use LSA dump to dump the contents of the let's just see whether that is currently there. So that doesn't exist. So we let's actually use LSA dump to actually dump that. So what I'm going to do is let's actually exit, or we can just continue from our current session. Right, so we'll say LSA dump, and we want to dump the contents of the SAM database. All right, so that dumps successfully, and again we get the NTLM hashes for all the users on the system, which again is useful to a certain extent. However, I also realized that during our last excursion with PowerUp, if I can actually execute it here, so PowerUp all checks, we were able to identify the unattended XML configuration file that's utilized, to actually mass install or mass configure Windows for installation or on quite a large amount of workstations. And that configuration file will typically contain passwords. Now they could be encrypted, but we'll actually have to see whether that works.
right? So let's actually see whether that's been invoked. All right, so I'm just going to wait for this to actually complete, and then what we're going to do is I'm going to locate that file, and let's see whether we can get any credentials that way. If we can't, we can then try and utilize the Windows credentials editor. Alternatively, I also have another target system that we can utilize to actually demonstrate some of the techniques that we can utilize with Mimikatz. However, we also have a few others that we can try and utilize, a few other tools that are not related to Mimikatz. So for example, if I with Meterpreter say hash dump, we also get the NTLM credentials that way. We also have a few Metasploit modules that we can utilize. For example, the credential collector module. Alternatively, you can also load Mimikatz using a load kiwi and hit enter. You can see you can then run the load kiwi or a kiwi, sorry. You can run the kiwi command and then execute a particular Mimikatz command, so you don't actually have to transfer the binary that way. You can also use the LSA dump SAM command with Meterpreter, dump SAM. That will again dump the same information we got with Mimikatz. If we then try and dump the secrets, we can see that, whoa, we got some interesting secrets here. We get the cached default password, and that is the password for the, let's see, what user is that for? This is, it looks like this might be utilized for, the domain is MS Edge Win 10. That's fine. The secret is still cached default password, and again, that primarily means that we can try and authenticate with this password. So that's an important piece of information we've been able to gather there. So I'm just going to paste that in there. Additionally, what we will also want to do is we also want to take a note of the NTLM credentials that we were able to harvest, and you can also see we have the Empire user there. And we gave it quite a simple password, so we don't need to crack that account. So I'm also going to log that information there. Yeah, so that's quite useful. As I said, let's try and see whether we were able to get the results from our PowerShell agent here and the PowerUp module in regards to the unattended file. So it looks like it's not giving us any output there, but if I go into my client here, and I type in agents, let me try and interact with this particular agent. So interact, and let's see. Right, so that's still running. We get the Mimikatz output here. And of course, this was the SAM database dump, I believe. We can always just check that. There we are, LSA dump SAM. And yeah, so we don't get anything additional there than we might have gotten manually, but still quite useful. I think there is a module that will actually check. So if we go in here and we search for the Mimikatz modules, there is a Mimikatz module that will check for the cache. I believe there we are, Mimikatz cache, and we can also run that as well. Let's see whether that brings up anything. So again, we can use both tools, you know, with a bit of synchronicity, if you will, and it really is great to actually do this as is. Right, so I think we can actually go ahead and try and locate that particular file. And I believe it was under the Windows directory. Let's try, is that, and then let's head over into a shell. There we are. Let's just take a step back here, and then that is under, that should be under Panther. And we have the unattend.xml file here. Right, so we can download this file and you know, try and analyze it. So I'm just going to head back into my Meterpreter session, and what I'll do is I will actually just head over into the Windows directory and Panther, and then we want to download the unattend.xml file. And let's see what we can do. Let's see whether we have any credentials stored in there. So I'm just going to open up my folder here, my home directory, and we'll open this up with, let's open it up with mousepad. So there we are, unattended.xml. And let's see whether this has been encrypted in any format or whether any information has been redacted. Yes, it looks like that is the case here. So the product key has been redacted. Let's take a look at the user configuration here. We can see that the IE user administrator is the actual admin there. The password for the I believe IE user is also deleted, as well as let's take a look here. Let's take a look. See, yeah, it looks like it's the same for all other users. Right, so that might have been a good opportunity to find passwords, but as I said, we were able to find a password from the cache, a clear text password that is. Right, and we haven't been able to move anywhere with that. What I want to try and do now is use another utility, or actually, let's use the shell here. Well, actually, before we do that, let's upload the binary to the target. Let's go into our temp directory here, and we'll upload the Windows Credentials Editor tool, which is also stored under user share Windows resources, and we should have the WCE folder right over there. WCE, and we're looking for WCE 64.exe, and we can upload that. And let's head over into our temp directory here, and we'll execute WCE 64.exe, and we can also, let's bring up the help menu here, WE64.exe help. And we have the following options here. So Windows Credentials Editor is a tool that allows you to dump passwords from memory, and of course you need a privileged session to actually do this. So we can list logon sessions and NTLM credentials. We can also list logon sessions and NTLM credentials indefinitely, as well as dump clear text passwords stored by the digest authentication package. So let's try that, right? Because that always has a good percentage of success, or a good chance of success. Let's see whether that's going to give us anything. Right, so it looks like that particular command doesn't bring us anything. And on this target, we're not having much luck in regards to clear text credentials, which is fine, I guess. Right, so back to the output from the Empire power-up module. You can see that the unattended path is actually provided here, and we've also checked that. Now, given that this is a privileged agent, or a high-integrity agent, it's going to enumerate much more information in regards to security. So let's see if we can identify anything useful here. So modifiable registry autoruns and configs, we mostly get them for VirtualBox, and nothing that looks useful here that we can actually use for credential access. Right, so if we go back in here, we can see that is going to tell us cannot get password from the digest package. Let's try and list the logon sessions and NTLM credentials indefinitely. So I'm going to do that right now. So WCE 64.exe, and we'll use the R flag there. And again, I'm not expecting any success with this. And the reason why I'm taking you through all of this is to show you that you can't rely on one tool like Mimikatz to do everything for you. You have to, again, be able to utilize multiple tools to get, useful information. And you also have to rely on vulnerabilities or files stored locally on the target system that could contain credentials. Right, so if this fails, then we can actually use target another target system, another Windows target, and we can again go through the same list of techniques that I've demonstrated here with Mimikatz, so on and so forth. So again, I'm just going to set that other system up, and I'll also ensure that it actually connects back to Empire so that we can also have it there. So I'm just going to set it up. Before we do that, I actually want to take you through one module, one Metasploit module. So I'm just going to put this in the background, and this is still my Windows 10 target, or the Windows 10 target. So I'm just going to search for collector, and whoops, that's bringing up too much there. So we'll search for credential collector. And we'll use the credential collector module. This is a post-exploitation module to try and see whether we can get any more credentials. Show options,
I'm going to set the session to session 3. I believe that's the correct session. All right, so we get, we get NTLM hashes, and we also get tokens that we can use for impersonation. And we already have elevated our privileges, so that's not the objective here. But we pretty much get the same result. So again, we can move on to the next target now. All right, so you can see my my second Windows target. It's running Windows Server 2008, and I currently have a high integrity agent, so I have elevated privileges, as well as my interpreter session. So again, get user ID, and again, if I can actually just say get privs, for example, here. Let's see. Yeah, we have the necessary or required privileges, if you will. Right, so let's take a look at running a few modules with Starkiller and of course Mimikatz modules. So again, we will list out or try and dump the contents or the logon passwords now. So I'm going to submit that particular task, and let's see whether we get any useful output. So this was the previous power up command that I'd run on the target just to test and see whether everything's running all right or okay. And again, you can see invoke all checks has been executed successfully. So again, I'm just going to wait for this particular task to execute successfully. All right, so it looks like we're still not yet getting any output from this particular module. So we're going to have to revert to a manual techniques here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to load incognito here. And again, there we are, and we're going to list the tokens that we can actually impersonate, just that I can actually we'll use this particular delegation token. So let me just copy that there without any white space, and we will then say impersonate, type that in correctly, impersonate token, and I will put that in there, and there we are. And if I now say get user ID and the authority system. Right, okay, so now we are currently in the temp directory, so I'm going to upload Mimikatz, so user share, and we will look for Windows resources, and Mimikatz, and we're looking for x64, and Mimikatz, there we are, .exe, upload that, and let's get into a shell now, and I will just head back into my temp directory. And we now have the Mimikatz executable here, so mimikatz.exe, and let's hit enter. And again, we can it's always good to check the privileges, so privilege debug, hit enter. Let's see whether everything's okay. Looks like everything's okay. We can now use within log on passwords, and yeah, we get the logon passwords here, and that runs successfully manually, obviously. So let's look at the users we're able to obtain, or the credentials we're able to obtain. So firstly, we get the domain and Kerberos information, and we also get, let's see, we can find any users here that there we are. So we get the credentials for the SSH server, which again essentially tell us the password is darling, although you with a few minor adjustments there. And yeah, these are pretty much the only logon credentials we get. And of course, based on when other users log on, we'll then get their password. So for example, if we take a look at, you can see that this is the user Vagrant here, and the password is null, so we're not able to get anything apart from the credentials for the SSH server, which again is quite useful, so we can actually note that down as well. Although we can actually try a few other techniques, like dumping the contents of the SAM database. So we can say LSA dump SAM, and let's see whether we get the contents of the SAM database. Indeed we do. We get the NTLM hashes for all the users on the system, which is great. We can actually copy this down, and yeah, that's pretty much how to utilize Mimikatz. And we can again try a few of the techniques here. So let's say the administrator actually logs in, or another user on the system logs into the system. We can also, again, try and We can also dump the logon passwords then. Of course, we are working with a VM that's not configured to have any other users, but again, we should be able to identify other logon passwords apart from the SSH server credentials. However, in this case, we still aren't able to gather anything using Mimikatz. Whatever the case, you can actually see we were able to get the administrator credentials here in clear text. So the username administrator and the password is Vagrant. So again, you can see that this actually works. When users log on to the system, we should be able to gather their clear text credentials and dump them from memory. Right, so let's take a look at using the Windows credentials editor. So I'm just going to exit here, and we will head back into Meterpreter, and just want to display my current directory. Let's upload user share, and we will say Windows resources. Is this under WCE? There we are. And we then want to get WCE 64.exe, right? And we get a shell session there, and I'll just move back into temp, and again WCE 64.exe with the help menu, and we can essentially log on. We can list the logon sessions in NTLM credentials. So let's actually try and see whether that works with WCE. So list logon sessions and NTLM credentials. Indeed, that is the case. We get the NTLM credentials here, but not the logon sessions. So again, we can use the E flag here to list logon sessions in NTLM credentials indefinitely. So let's try and do that now. So WCE 64.exe, and we're using the let's see, we're using the R option, or the R flag. Let's see whether that gives us any useful information. All right, so that doesn't give us any information, so we can try the Hail Mary, if you will, to essentially display everything, and that can be done using the W flag, which will dump clear text passwords stored by the digest authentication package. So WCE 64.exe, and we'll then use the W flag, hit enter. Let's see again whether this gives us any information. WCE, there we are. We get the clear text passwords for the administrator user, which is Vagrant. We get the clear text password for the Vagrant user, which is also Vagrant, and the SSH server password, which is again just Darling, or whatever the case, whatever you want to call it. Right, so that is how to use the Windows credentials editor. And of course, with Empire, we ran into a few issues here. As you can see, it seems like we didn't get any useful output from the PowerShell, or rather the Mimikatz modules that we utilized, which is why it is always good to have a manual, why it's always good to know how to perform these techniques manually. That being said, we can take a look at a few other techniques that we utilized, and of course I also want to take you through the through some of the Meterpreter modules firstly, but again, if I say hash dump, we should be able to get all the password hashes here. Right, and we can also copy that, which I'll also save here. So again, and I'll save this as I'll save this on my desktop as hash.txt. Right, and these are NTLM version 1 hashes, because this is Windows Server 2008, and I'll take you through how to crack these because it's much easier. Again, the process remains fairly similar for Windows 10 or Windows 7 and later, but I would recommend using Hashcat. In this case, we can use John the Ripper, and yeah, so I'll take you through that. But before I do that, we can also use the credential collector module, but I've already taken you through the process of using it, so we can actually touch upon the process of cracking hashes and how that can be done or facilitated. So I'm going to head over, I'll create a new terminal on my desktop, and we'll use John the Ripper. So let's get started with that. All right, so to crack hashes with John the Ripper, we're just going to say sudo John, and then the format is going to be equal to NT, and then we specify the hash file, which in this case will be on our desktop. So hash.txt, we hit enter,
and let's see whether we're able to crack that particular password, or the passwords for these particular hashes. One thing you can do, let me just abort that, is you can actually get rid of the accounts that you're not interested in. So for example, we can get rid of the rest if we're only interested in the administrator account. So I'm just going to save that. Of course, you don't need to do this, but as is the case when you have many users, you want to crack what's the most important. So it looks like I've already cracked this password before. So let me just sudo remove root, and I'll just remove the John directory there. But of course, let's also remove it completely. That doesn't look like it exists there. Type that in correctly. There we are, and we can try that again, and there we are. We crack it successfully. So we can see that the administrator password is Vagrant there, and we cracked it really quickly without any issues with John the Ripper. Now of course this is much more different when it comes down to Windows 10 hashes, NTLM hashes, as the hashing algorithm is much stronger, and I'll probably make a video that covers that in depth. But you're again of course going to require a much more powerful rig than you currently have if you're going to be cracking hashes. I just wanted to take you through the workflow or a methodology of essentially gathering credentials. That being said, that's pretty much all that I wanted to cover in this video. We've covered quite a few techniques and tools that you can use for credential access. As I said, one key takeaway is that you should never rely too much on one tool or automated modules, as you saw with Starkiller or Empire. And again, you should always try your techniques manually, because the output is much more accurate and you get a clearer idea of what's wrong. That being said, I'll be seeing you in the next video. A huge thank you to all of our Patreons. Your support is greatly appreciated, and this is a formal thank you. So thank you Shamir Douglas, Ryan Carr, Sandor, Michael Busby, Sid Saab, Doozy, Tafim Bari, Dustin Umpress, and Michael Hubbard. Your support is greatly appreciated, and you keep us making even more high quality content for you guys. So thank you.